Okay, hey there everyone. I actually am going to talk about probably a really long theory. I'm not so sure how long this video is going to allow me to read off the page of all my thoughts that I've written down, but I would like to first give out two shout outs to two Deviantartists who actually gave me the idea to come up with this, and I'm probably going to have to give them some comments on their stories to let them know ahead of time that I added on to their stories and or theory creepypastas so that they know that this is why I came up with what I came up with. But the first shout out is for Kinswaous, and the second one is for CandiTheWild Pig. Thanks to you two for y'all's amazing stories. I want to say that I've read both and I like them. They're pretty good concepts. I actually was able to come up with even further information to come up with my theory thanks to what y'all wrote, and I appreciate what y'all have given me thus far to come to terms with what I have. Now, as far as my own theory, it's going to be kind of long, so please forgive me. And it's also about the TV show Ruby Gloom, if I have not already confirmed that yet. So, here goes. So, my theory, basically, may be a bit cliche, of course, so please, no hate. It is probably pretty cliche and everything, but here goes. Basically, if the story by CandiTheWild Pig was canon, then my theory would add on by saying what we now see in the finishing product known as Ruby Gloom, now, of course, takes place several years after the power plant accident, meaning Ruby's mansion used to be the orphanage before they remodeled it into a less depressing orphanage home, otherwise, a hotel or a resort, some kind of place that people could stay the night for one night and then, move on the next day to go somewhere else, some kind of like side place to sleep and whatever, one of those places. And since it is near a cemetery, it seems to make even more plausible sense. Also, when Mr. Mumbles moved into Glimsville, it was at night. And, speaking of it being nighttime, let's take a minute to kind of sidetrack it for a second. We all know that, there is that cemetery there, right? And before I carry on, as an honorable mention, another, strange occurrence was that one time Skullboy goes to the cemetery, still trying to figure out who his ancestors are. He comes across Skelly T and his gang. And I wanted to add in, since I didn't write this down on paper, that furthermore into CandiTheWild Pig's story about it being based on children that were, alive and then died in a power plant accident, I'd like to also add into this that maybe Skelly T and his gang used to be the workers that worked at that power plant, and the reason why the chemical combustion and the explosion and whatever, happened that day was because they were too busy being in the clouds because they didn't really like their job, and they liked jazz music and scat singing instead, and scatting and whatnot, like Scatman John or something. And so they weren't really fully focused on what they were doing leading up into the accident. And that's just something else I wanted to add in. So this may basically imply the characters were already dead, basically, and at certain times of the night come from their graves, due to the fact that, in the show, the house is kind of near a cemetery, which has been proven to be canon. That part is proven. So they basically come from their graves to basically play in or at or anywhere near the mansion, as seen, in previous, several episodes. I haven't really seen them all, but that's what I'm getting from this. Here's the next part, though. This part really, I think, makes it work the most. Since Frank and Lynn originally lived in the garage that's next to the mansion in the TV show, that could imply that back when the mansion was an orphanage, that it was actually a storage supply shed for tools. With the hidden tools that the orphans did not actually know about, except that if you've actually read CandiTheWild Pig's story, she wrote in the part about Petrie and Sven being the inspiration for Frank and Lynn, and how at one point they had a fight, and so Sven found a saw somewhere and cut them apart. So at this part, what I'm getting at is it's kind of strange that, oddly enough, the first place that, Frank and Lynn actually happen to live at before they misunderstand Ruby in a later episode about them being able to be invited into living in the mansion instead, was at the garage. Because, it's like kind of hinting at the fact that Candy the Wild Pig's theory about Frank and Lynn's inspiration might actually be more true. So that's what I actually realized. So, I guess, other than that, the next part would have to be... Hold on for just a second. Okay, so the next part, to actually further explain why I also believe that Candy the Wild Pig is definitely onto something with the creepypasta, even though it's supposed to... Most creepypasta are supposed to be fake, to be honest. I don't get that with her, with his or hers. And that's because, to further point this out, in the episode of Ruby Gloom, Season 1, episode number 19, Sunny Days, Lynn makes a weird statement about how they all could have been dead already after, some other characters had said something that caused him to reply that statement. And I find that oddly funny, because, that got my attention. You see, when I read Candy the Wild Pig's story on Ruby Gloom and the part on Petrie and Sven, I had a feeling Sven was who we know as Lynn in the show today. So the fact that Lynn said this means he indeed knows something we don't, and his antics are merely a ruse to throw people off. Now, in Kinswaous' story, she believes that Mr. Mumbles named Frank and Lynn sorta after himself and stitched them together, despite the show showing them born this way since birth. However, if Candy Wild Pig's story was actually canon,